shortly hereafter is scheduled and ought to be on viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please notify the chairman. Pursuant to Governor Baker's June 16, 2021 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extensions of this March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until July 15, 2022. This meeting of the Chatham Board of Health is being conducted via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the number 1-508-945-4410, and the conference ID is 901-627-88#, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and it's simulcast on Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. And now I'd like to turn the meeting over to John Beckley, our chairman.
Thank you, Judy. It shall be the policy of this board to conduct its meetings under the open meetings law so as to encourage public participation whenever time permits and as part of agenda item discussions. I'd like to establish the fact that we do have a quorum. We have a quorum of 4 for tonight's meeting, plus we have 2 alternates. I'm sorry, I'm confused where people are sitting here.
And Noble.
But that's okay.
Noble is attending virtually.
Noble is attending virtually.
Yes.
Does he count? He doesn't count, or does he count as
He counts.
against the quorum being remote?
Yes.
Okay, so we have all 5 Board of Health members present, plus both alternates. All right, let's start the meeting. Item 1 is an Energy and Climate Action Committee presentation with Energy and Climate Action Committee. Sarah Grissom?
Sarah
Welcome.
Griscom, yeah, Town of Chatham, and thank you, Chairman. I'm here as part of the Energy and Climate Action Committee. It used to be just the Energy Committee, and last year it turned into the Energy and Climate Action Committee. So we've got an added charge, and part of that charge, after we explained to the Select Board what we're concerned about in terms of climate change, they gave us this charge, which is, if you could see, post that up. We're supposed to study the current practices of town staff and committees towards addressing climate impacts, develop a process for addressing the climate impacts, and then develop recommendations for town climate action. So real broad, kind of vague, but the first thing is to find out what everybody is doing and how you guys, each committee, each group that's working with the town, what their concern is, what they've already planned, what's in progress, and what's not being done that they feel is a gap. So that's why I'm here. None of my other committee members were available, so it's lonesome old me. These are our risks. These are, serious risks. We're surrounded by ocean, and we've got more extreme weather coming down the line. We've got sea level rise to deal with. We have more flooding that's going to be occurring, and we already do have more. I mean, this is already in progress. Storm surges are going to be higher because the storms are going to be larger. Temperatures are rising. Ocean acidification is affecting the growth of our shellfish and our tiny organisms and phytoplankton, so the base of our food chain. And then there's these unknowns that are going to happen. We don't really know what. So we're trying to become, you've heard the word resilient, so the town's trying to become more resilient and anticipate these changes so that we aren't sideswiped. And but there's an urgency, and we need to move fast. And town governments are not known for moving fast, and people are resistant to change. So we're going to try to kind of hurry this process along, but we want a lot of impact. We want a lot of insight from you. We want to get everybody on board. So this is not adversarial. We're teaming with you guys. and we want to find out what you need and if we can help. So that's why we are. So let me just go on to the commission report. This is the Cape Cod Commission's economic impact analysis just from sea level rise. So we're talking just sea level rise. This is not loss of forest lands. This is not groundwater contamination. This is just sea level rise. And for the whole Cape, they estimated at roughly $50 billion of damage on top of everything else by the end of this century. If you look at Chatham's share of that, we've added them in, underlined was what the commission came up with as a price tag, and then we figured out and extrapolated the ones that have asterisks. So this is road damage, lost tax revenue, beach tourism reduced, land value decreased, and building damage. And I think the Board of Health, will be involved in a lot of those, but I see that, all of them are going to be impacting your board. And you're going to be making new rules and regulations, hopefully, to deal with that. So what else did I want to say? I think these are just the steps we've taken so far, and you're on our list. We haven't talked with the finance department yet, and we haven't talked with the Shellfish. There's a group of other organizations and committees we need to talk to. But we do have a very substantial volunteer group that is eager to help and be involved and have the kind of expertise that this committee needs. So we're very lucky. So all I want to say is I'll leave with this map here. And this shows with just a 2-foot sea level rise, the increased hazards around the town of Chatham. And what you see is all of our marshes are gone if nothing is done. So the marshes provide a great barrier between our land and the ocean. They're extremely important to protect the properties along the coast. And as we all know, nutrients come from septic systems as well as fertilizers. And you guys are very much involved with regulating septic systems and have the ability to regulate possibly fertilizer use, but at least make some recommendations to our town. So it's coming, and we've not dealt with something like this before. So I have questions for you that I was given by my committee to ask, and they're open-ended questions, and I just would like to find out and then report back to my committee. So, any questions so far? Okay. So the top of the list was, are you following the literature on the issue of sea level rise and how it's causing groundwater levels to rise? And I don't know who, do you want to, Chairman, would you?
Well, I just, for myself, I'd say partly. I'm not a student of it in the sense that I've read published articles, but I'm up with all the writings in today's media. Mm-hmm. So through newspapers and other magazines, I'm certainly with interest read about those. But I don't claim detailed knowledge either, but I'm certainly aware.
Yeah,
I don't know whether anybody else
either,
wants to weigh in.
I think,
Oh, excuse me, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think we look to Dr. Duncanson a lot to advise us and keep us current as to what's going on. Is that, do you believe?
I can see it in my own backyard. I live on Frostfish Creek, and it has an island that comes out like this. And within the last year and a half, almost half of it is underwater now. And this is, just in the last year and a half. It's very shallow. It used to be, I guess, an old cranberry bog at one time, but it's tidal. The tide comes in and out and everything. But just you can see the water getting taller and higher and higher as we're going along. That's just one little place. So I can imagine some of these other places. We got to be aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very aware of sea level rise. I also live on Frostfish Creek. I'm not aware of the close relationship between sea level rise and groundwater rise, other than the lens floats on top of salt water. But I'm not aware of any other relationship between sea level and groundwater.
I offer up some resources down below here on this handout, so
I mean, do you know what that relationship is?
yes, as sea levels rise,
Yeah.
actually, they impinge on the groundwater and they push up the lens. They'll
it's
actually
because-
push up.
okay.
And it's happening down in, well, Louisiana is a classic situation, and they find that they see that happening with sea level impinging on the land, the water tables rise, people's basements flood, septic systems fail, so.
I would think you would get much more saltwater intrusion, too, into groundwater wells, and that would be an issue that we would see as well.
Yeah, that's what I was getting around to. So concern about groundwater, it'll present a bunch of challenges in the future. So we were curious to know, what is the current requirement of separation between groundwater and the bottom of septics? Is that,
We go by Title V, and in sandy soils, it's a 5-foot offset between the bottom of the septic system and the estimated seasonal high groundwater table. And that's quite conservative. I think Massachusetts is much more conservative than some other states as far as that goes. For existing systems, when they do an inspection, we only require a 4-foot, because some of these systems were put in a very long time ago, maybe before Title V was even codified. So if they have a 4-foot offset, we allow them to pass the inspection.
okay.
But we don't have a computer program or anything that lists all the septic systems in Chatham and what they're, where they're located and how they're related to groundwater, so that if there is a 1-foot rise in sea level, we don't have any way of going and picking these 17 properties that
No.
need to have their septic system failed.
No,
The only time we fail a septic system is when we inspect it or when there's a transfer of property.
correct.
So there may be hundreds of failed septic systems in Chatham, and we have no way of,
Well, there are FEMA maps that you can run
But we don't.
scenarios and see what happens
Right.
with a 1-foot
Right.
rise, and then you could overlay that with all the areas of the town that would fall within that area. And then, through Judy and the historical knowledge, we should be able to figure out what communities, what neighborhoods
Yeah.
would be at a threat. Hopefully
before-
by then, we'll be on sewer, we'll be on town sewer. We're taking a long view on this, but
We have a hand, Dr. Duncanson, if,
yes, Dr. Duncanson.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, might I suggest that I think it would be a lot easier and more beneficial if the Climate Action Committee were to present their questions to your board, and then answers can be put together. I'm a little concerned about just kind of doing this off the cuff right now.
Okay.
These are very complex questions, and there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of information we're aware of. But, it's not as simple as a 1-foot sea level rise equates to hundreds of septic systems being failed.
right.
Every septic system is a unique hydrologic situation. And, where a neighbor's system may not be impacted, another neighbor in the other direction may be. So these are not just simply, let's map, the FEMA sea level rise maps and then decide that everybody in a particular area, their septic system would be failed. So I would suggest that the appropriate way is for the Energy Committee or the Climate Action Committee to provide their questions to your board in writing, and then you would then have the opportunity to discuss them and formulate responses to them. I think that would be much easier than, just trying to answer them right now off the cuff, quite honestly.
Okay. That's a good suggestion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Sarah just sent us these questions right before the meeting, so we really haven't had much time to, absorb the topic. But Sarah, would you be open to us putting together?
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes much more sense.
I mean,
No,
we
thank
could-
you, Bob, that's a great idea.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we can talk generally, if there's any, more general questions, but I think a lot of these we can answer in writing and really give you guys a better idea of what we're doing and how we're doing it, and give us an idea of how,
And then we can
what we
talk-
should
we
be
can
thinking
talk-
about.
We can talk through it among ourselves, too, with Bob's input and your input, and kind of craft what we want to say.
Yeah.
I think that makes more sense.
I think that's a great idea. I think one more last thing then I'd like to say is that I think the Energy and Climate Action Committee would like to have your committee and the Conservation Commission get together and have a powwow about regulating groundwater and septic. And with the new, what is it, Article 52 that was just passed, I think that expands the Conservation Commission's reach. So that was one thing that the committee had asked me to suggest to you guys and ask. I think the other question is, what can we do for you? So while you're going through these questions, I know that the town staff are tapped out, and we do have a large group of volunteers that want to help. So keep us in mind as we move forward. Thank you very much. Thanks for the time.
Sarah, can I have your phone number?
508?
We'll give it to you,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Sarah, if you want to write it down. Then Diane will give it to. I think if you'd like, Bob and I can work on some of these answers and provide them to the board, and then we can perhaps discuss them at another meeting,
Okay. That would
just
be good.
generally, and then we can then provide them to Sarah's commission, or committee.
Good.
And I can talk to
Mr.
the
Chairman?
conservation agent as well about getting together with them.
Yes, Doctor? Dr. Duncanson?
Yeah, I just want to say, just so the public is clear, Article 52 that was recently passed at Saturday's town meeting does not expand the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. Article 52 was really a housekeeping one to bring our current floodplain bylaw up into total conformance with FEMA regulations. So it made some changes, but honestly, they really didn't expand the scope of anything. It was just to bring it up to the latest FEMA requirements in order for the community to stay in the flood insurance program, which then provides discounts to Chatham residents that have to purchase flood insurance. So it did not expand the authority of the Conservation Commission. So I just wanted folks to be clear on that.
Okay. Thank you. All right, are we ready to proceed on the agenda? Item number 2 is a public hearing to review revisions to the Board of Health sewer connection regulation. This issue and the following two we have begun to discuss at a prior meeting, but we have to go through it again to comply with the requirements of the regulation. So, Judy, could you give a very brief synopsis as to what these revisions relate to?
So the first one was, Bob put this together. I don't know, Bob, do you want to talk on this?
Sure, I can talk on it. Mr. Chair, before we start the discussion, though, you need to open the public hearing.
Okay.
So someone will have to make a motion to
Okay.
open the public hearing. Because Noble is on the phone, you should take a roll call vote of the members to go into the public hearing. And then once we're done, someone would need to make a motion to close the public hearing, and you'd have to do that for each of the three
Okay.
individually.
Okay. So can I get a motion, this relates to hearing item number 2, the public hearing to review the revisions of the Board of Health sewer connection regulation. I'd like to get a motion to open the hearing for this
I'll
regulation.
make a motion that we open the hearing.
We have a second? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And,
Aye.
okay, Noble's on remotely, so Noble, your vote is aye?
Aye, yes.
Okay. Now we have to allow for any public input on this item, if there is any. Maybe we should give
Yeah,
a,
if you'd like, Mr. Chair, I can give just a very brief synopsis of what this is about.
okay,
As you know, the board has had a sewer connection regulation since I think it was 2011. And it provided for a one-year period from the time that the Board of Health issues a sewer connection order for an individual property owner to make said connection. Over the last couple of years with COVID and with more towns on the Cape moving into the sewer arena, we have found, based on feedback from many citizens, that frankly, they can't get it done in a year. That engineers are currently 6 to 8 months out designing, and installers are roughly 4 to 6 months out. So people just aren't able to get everything done within a year, and that causes more people to have to come to the Board of Health to request time extensions. So to try to ameliorate that for both the citizens as well as members of the board, I'm proposing that we increase the time period for sewer connections from 1 year to 2 years. Given the fact that, all the engineers and the installers are frankly so busy, and that, there's more competition out there. Orleans is making connections, Harwich is making connections, Falmouth is making connections, Provincetown is making more connections. So it's just a lot busier than it was 10 years ago when we first started this process. So that was my recommendation. That's the proposed change, is basically go from 1 year to 2 years, and then alter some of the other timeframes for things like real estate transfers, so that they reflect the same kind of extended time period. Thank you.
okay, thank you. Anybody wish to comment from the public?
We have one hand up. It just says guest.
Okay,
Yes, that's Elaine Gibbs. This is more of a general question as it relates to that. I know, we've been laying a lot of the mains that connect to the sewers and on a lot of different roads. And so far, I believe only 450 or 500 homes have been connected to the sewer since after the wastewater treatment facility, I think January of 2013. Do we have any sense of how many houses, have, even though they haven't been given orders, are now in a position where their roads have been sewered, so that we get a sense of how many properties we think will get connected within the next year or two? Because that's a pretty low number as far as, meeting our objectives by 2030.
That would be for Bob, I think, to answer.
Yeah, it's several hundred homes are currently on streets where sewer has been provided. A number of those property, it's not always appropriate to look strictly at the number of houses that have been fully connected. That is roughly 440 homes at this point in time. But there's another 100 or so that are actually in the process, meaning they've submitted their plans are under review, their plans have been reviewed, they've been issued a permit, and frankly, they're just waiting for the contractors to actually do the work. So there's a fair number in that category, somewhere between, I'd say probably about 150 that are in that, kind of in between category. So while the actual number may be 430 or 440, there's another 100 or so. And then in the current contracts that were just finished up, we have another couple of hundred properties for which I'll be coming to the Board of Health as soon as tonight's vote is over, asking that orders be issued for those properties to go ahead and connect.
All right, thank
Okay, so
you.
like in 3 years, do you think we'll have 1,500 homes or 2,000 connected, or? I'm just trying to figure out how we're gonna get to maybe 5,000 properties or 4,000 properties by 2030.
I can't give you a projection. It's contingent upon many things taking place in the private sector and whatnot. So we are still on track with the comprehensive wastewater management plan, to get the areas sewered in the timeframes that were originally laid out. There may be some modification of the second phase, which is years 20 to 30, depending on where we are at the end of phase 1.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on this, and during this open hearing? Okay, if hearing none, can I get a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close the meeting.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor of closing the hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Noble?
Aye.
Thank you.
Yeah, aye.
Okay, now let's adopt the revisions. So can I get a motion to adopt the regulations amendments that are before you tonight?
I'll make a motion to adopt the,
Okay, can I get a second? Second. Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
aye.
Aye. Noble?
Aye.
Okay, so that first one is finished. That's been adopted. Let's go to the next item, which is a public hearing to review revisions to the Board of Health minimum requirements for subsurface disposal of sanitary sewage regulations. This is the one that relates to clarification of the definition of a bedroom. Can I get a motion to open the hearing?
I'll make a motion to open the hearing.
Can I get a second? Second. Thank you, Ed. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Noble?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so the hearing is open. Any public input on this proposed change? Hearing none. Can I get a motion to close the hearing? Motion to close. Thank you, Ed. Can I get a second? Second. Thank you, Ron. All those in favor of the motion to close this hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Noble?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, now, can I get a motion to approve the revisions in this regulation? Can I get a
I'll
motion?
make a motion to approve the revision.
Okay, can I get a second? Second. All in favor of approving the motion, say aye. Aye. Noble?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, that's item number 2. That was item number 3, I'm sorry. Item number 4 is a revisions to a related Board of Health regulation called the Board of Health Nitrogen Loading Regulation. And the revisions in this are duplicative of what we just voted, i.e. it relates to an attempt to further define the definition of a bedroom. So can I get a motion to open the public hearing for this regulation? Ed, thank you. Second. Ron, thanks, Ron. Okay, we have a motion to open this hearing. Can I get a call the question? Who's in favor of this, vote aye. Aye.
Aye.
Noble?
Aye.
Okay, this hearing has been opened now. Anybody wish to comment on this? Hearing none, let's get a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the hearing and approve the changes.
Thank you. Ron? All in favor of the motion to close the hearing, say aye. Aye. Can I get a motion to accept the revisions to this regulation?
Motion to accept.
Thank you, Ron. Can I get a second? Thank you, Ed. Okay, all in favor of the motion to adopt the revisions in this regulation, say aye. Aye. Noble?
Aye.
Thank you, sir. All right, so we've gone through those three, and we've approved all three. Item number 5. Dr. Duncanson, can you give us a status report on the John McGrath property at 32 Mill Hill Road?
Yes, certainly. So the notice to proceed has been given to the contractor, which is Robert Childs out of Dennis. I am waiting for them to get back to me with their schedule as to exactly when they want to undertake the work, so that then we can give the property owner the required notice. And I have also confirmed with DPW that they have their guardrail contractor ready to go. A PO has been issued to the contractor that installs guardrails throughout town. And that contractor is ready to go. As soon as the cleanup takes place, the contractor will come in and install the guardrail, within a day or a couple days or so of that cleanup taking place, so that we don't get into a scenario where we clean it up and then there's a delay in getting the guardrail in, and material suddenly starts to appear again. So, and then once the guardrail goes up, the no parking signs will also go up commensurate with that. So at this point, the only thing we're waiting on is to get confirmation from the cleanup contractor as to exactly what day they've got the cleanup scheduled to take place.
Thank you. Questions? Dick?
Bob, now that the town meeting has approved the $150,000 nuisance remediation fund,
Yep.
when can we go forward to inspect the rest of the property and deal with what has to be done there?
That will be up to the Board of Health. We can work to schedule that at the board's convenience. And I think that that'll be your call as to when you want to do it and to what extent you may or may not want to look at cleaning up the rest of the property. So if you're interested in moving forward on that, we can certainly work to get something scheduled.
Should we talk about that?
Yeah, maybe we should wait until the first cleanup is done, so then we'd have a better
That page is turned then.
idea
Yeah.
of what's left.
Judy,
after
can we put it on the agenda, either meeting in June, once we have some daylight on the first phase getting done?
Sure, I mean, this topic has been on our agenda, so we definitely can specify that we're going to talk about the next phase of the cleanup. And I agree with Dick that I think maybe get the roadway cleaned up and see how everything goes, and then take the next step after that. But we certainly can talk about it at our next meeting.
Okay.
Excuse me, how soon do you think the construction crew will come through for the cleanup? Can you hear me okay? Yeah.
I'm waiting to hear from them. They didn't hear back from them last week. I'm going to be calling them tomorrow to see if they've got it scheduled yet.
Okay.
And then, once they schedule it, they indicated that it would probably be, 1 to 2 days worth to actually do the work. So,
Right.
yeah.
'Cause I think-
it's just a question of fitting it into their schedule. When they have the equipment and the manpower available to do it.
Because I think they signed the contract in April, is that not correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, but they had 21 days to do the work from the time that the notice to proceed was issued, which was issued not last week, but the end of the week before that, because we were waiting to get confirmation on the whole guardrail issue to make sure that we could work those two at the same time.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Noble has his hand up, John?
Noble?
Oh, yeah, no, That question was what I had. How long does Childs have? So he's got about 2 more weeks to get the job completed, it sounds like.
Yes.
That's all, thanks.
Any more questions or comments for Dr. Bob? Ron?
I have a question. Could you possibly get us the addresses of those other pieces of property that we'll be looking at? I know you've mentioned there's other properties. You know, I think we should be able to see them, or at least begin to get a look at them.
Yeah, we can do our best. There's a few that I can think of off the top of my head, so definitely. I think we talked about doing that before, and I hadn't got that together.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. All right. Good news is coming slowly, right? All right, item 6, which is an update and a discussion regarding Chatham water quality discussion regarding PFAS contamination source investigation. Bob, can you update us on that?
Sure, there's been a couple of things that have taken place over the last week or so, if you will. Let me share my screen here very quickly. And the first thing that I want to show you, hopefully you can all see the picture. This is the pressure vessel that arrived last week from the manufacturer out in the Midwest. And this is being installed, as you can see, right by well number 5. And it is in the process of being piped between the well and this pressure vessel. And then from here, it will go into the distribution system. But this is the large vessel that will hold the granular activated carbon to provide the removal of the PFAS from well number 5. And as I said, it's in the process, it's here, it's in the process of being piped. The folks that are doing that work are anticipating to have it ready for testing the week just before Memorial Day weekend. At least that is their target. We're not, those of us in the town are not absolutely convinced, you know, that everything is going to go perfectly and they will be able to meet the target of having this vessel online before Memorial Day weekend. We think it may be closer to the 1st or the, you know, probably Father's Day weekend in June, if you will. But they are working towards getting it in, getting everything piped together and getting it operational. You know, getting the GHC installed, having DEP come down and review it and approve it in time for Memorial Day weekend. But we don't want to make any promises that that is absolutely going to take place. So that is good news on that front, that it is here and it's being installed as we speak, if you will. And then the second item of interest is we have issued the PFAS source assessment study proposals, and proposals are due from the consulting community by May 26th, at which time they could be reviewed, and then hopefully shortly thereafter contract let to, you know, the chosen consultant to undertake that work. When I last checked last week, I think it was on Thursday, we'd had about 10 firms take out the RFP, which is, you know, good news. Now, you know, that doesn't mean that 10 firms are going to provide proposals, but it shows that there was a fair amount of interest in the proposal out on the street. So that's always good news when you see that kind of a response. And then in addition to that, we'd also sent it directly to firms that we'd been talking to last fall about this issue. We sent it directly to them, and then based on the newspaper ad and the Combis ad, there was about 8 or 10 firms additional that expressed an interest. So as I say, those proposals are due at the end of this month, and then they'll be reviewed with the goal of issuing a contract, you know, sometime early in June to get that assessment underway.
Very good. Well, that's good progress. Any other comments for Dr. Duncanson on this? Carol?
Yes, hi. I would wondering if you would mind sharing about the modified water ban. I'm not sure if it was in the Chronicle yet, but I thought maybe that might be of interest to people, the modified outdoor watering ban.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the Board of Selectmen last week had a discussion about the outdoor watering ban. They did modify that ban to allow for outdoor watering of lawns 2 days a week, odd or even, depending on your address. So I believe it's even-numbered houses can water on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and odd-numbered houses can water on Wednesday and Friday. The watering has to take place after 5 p.m. and before 9 a.m. in the morning. They also are allowing that shrubs and flower gardens can be watered on the same odd-even cycle, the same time frame, but those can be hand watered only. So you can't water flowers and shrubs, flower gardens and shrubs with an automatic system, but you can use an automatic system for lawns, either new lawns or established lawns. I think it's important for folks to remember, and this was in the press release that was issued, most vegetation that's established needs only about an inch of water per week to stay in good shape. And so if it rains and we get an inch or more of water in a week, you don't need to do any watering with town water, because Mother Nature has provided all the water that, most vegetation will need. All the other items in the ban, things like house washing, car washing, furniture washing, those things, they remain banned. And the board did provide, I'm not sure exemption's the right word, but clarification that the fire department can use water as needed for training purposes. They also have to pressure test their hoses on a regular basis, as well as maintain the fire apparatus so that, it doesn't get full of dirt and grime, which can affect some of their valves and whatnot, which, could lead to problems. So it was clarified that the fire department can use the water as necessary for those purposes. So that is how it was modified last Tuesday. And the board is going to revisit the modifications in June after well number 5 is in progress with the PFAS treatment, and provided that is all going as expected, I expect that the water ban will be even, modified more, or potentially, it may no longer be needed, depending on what we see going on. Keep in mind that Chatham is really battling 2 issues that some of our neighboring communities are only battling 1. Everybody on the Cape is battling the fact that groundwater levels are lower than normal, but Chatham is also dealing with the PFAS issue. So hopefully by, early June, we've addressed the PFAS issue on a short-term basis while the permanent treatment plant gets built, which is roughly 18 months away. And hopefully, if we get some more rainy weather here, we can start to see a better rebound in groundwater levels than we've seen, so far this spring. But, keep in mind, I drive all over the Cape, and everything right now looks lush and green, and that's a reflection of, how much rain we have had. And then, just like last night, it was cool, it was damp, it was foggy, and that's all good for the vegetation. Doesn't necessarily do much to replenish the groundwater levels, though. So. All right.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Duncanson before we move? Okay, let's go to item number 7, which is an update discussion regarding COVID-19. Doctor?
I think Gloria Freeman just put her hand up. I don't know whether she's got a question on the water or COVID.
Gloria?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to speak on the water ban, if I may.
You certainly may.
Thank you. I hope that you were provided a copy of a telephone survey I did on water restrictions and bans of the 15 Cape towns, where I oftentimes was fortunate to speak with Dr. Duncanson's counterparts when I called the municipalities or public water systems If you didn't, I'll be glad to send you a copy. I talked with 18 municipalities or public water department systems. Cape Cod has 15 towns, but Barnstable has 4 separate water systems. I will give you the bottom line. As of June 1st, on the Cape, 8 of the municipalities or public water department systems will use the odd-even day system. 3, including Chatham, will allow outdoor watering, irrigation systems 2 times a week, and 7 with no restrictions or bans. But prior to the Select Board voting to modify the policy, as you know, we had a total ban in Chatham, including no hand watering. And it is important to note that Cape Cod remains at level 0 for drought, meaning normal conditions. According to Mass DEP, communities or districts should consider that if private well users are excluded from its water conservation regulations, the public water supply customers will be subject to restrictions, but their neighbors with private wells will not. This could result in perceived inequities among local citizens and could encourage the drilling of private wells, thus defeating conservation goals. It seems that is what we are doing. I hope you will consider the damage that can be done by encouraging private wells. Our newly modified outdoor water ban allows private well owners to draw unlimited amounts of water from the aquifer. Is this what we want? Mass DEP's Model Water Use Restriction Bylaw includes options for regulating private wells, so there is not inequity between private well users and property owners who are strictly on our municipal water system. I'm not advocating that further restriction, but I am not sure encouraging private wells is the best approach, and equity is important. The goal of water restrictions is to conserve water, but by encouraging private wells not subject to water restrictions, that conservation goal is being bypassed. We have been unable to find out how many wells there are in Chatham. I believe that private well applications come under your authority, so perhaps you'll be able to determine that. Dr. Duncanson told the Select Board that water conservation is important, but we are unable to pump enough water at this time. Perhaps that will get better when more wells are online, but it seems that more wells, deeper wells, are what we need. Even now, the newly modified ban is arbitrary and inequitable. Obviously, Dr. Duncanson believes what he is doing is in Chatham's best interest. I don't question that, but it should be equitable. Only those of us who went to great expense to retrofit our irrigation systems or dig a private well no later than January 1st, 2022 are being monitored. This was the mandate, and yet while there are 1,328 registered irrigation systems, which seems low to me, only 477 have installed second meters. Those of us who went to the expense and trouble to install a second meter to follow the rules are now being monitored and paying a higher rate for the water we use. And the only way that non-registered systems are caught is when the property sells. The majority of the select board members agreed that the strict water ban on users of our municipal water system was not equitable. They will be reviewing it again in early June to make other changes. I hope that you, our Board of Health, will discuss some of these issues in the near future, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you, Gloria.
Comments?
Yes, the water ban in Chatham, to my knowledge, is based on two issues. One is inadequate storage and inadequate wells during the summer when there's a large increase in the population. And the other issue is a potential for lowering the groundwater to a dangerous level. But the primary reason right now appears to be a limited pumping and storage capacity. And so the private wells are actually reducing the amount of water drawn from the municipal system for irrigation and would be beneficial in this situation. And so I think we need to make it clear, you know, what the primary reason for the water restriction is. Is it some lowering of the groundwater to a dangerous level, which I mean, Dr. Duncanson has said in the past that we're only using about 5% of the water that's in the aquifer Cape-wide. So if the problem is primarily pumping and storage, then there really isn't any reason to prevent people from having private wells.
Mr. Chair?
Yes. Go ahead, Dr. Duncanson.
Yeah, just, you know, we've talked about this frequently with the Select Board, the Water and Sewer Commissioners. We've talked about it before with the Board of Health. As I tried to say earlier, Chatham is in a unique position right now compared to the rest of the towns on the Cape. We are in a position where we have two large production wells that were taken offline because of PFAS. What we're trying to do with the water ban is to minimize the strain on the rest of the wells that we have in Chatham. And Tom Temple has spoken to this issue on numerous occasions. You know, ideally in the industry, you want to work your wells about 16 hours a day, and then you allow them to rest for the other 8 hours of the day so that you don't overtax the mechanical equipment, the pumps, and you provide an opportunity for water to recharge into the well drawdown area, because if that drawdown area becomes too low, you can start having problems with the pumps. You'll start sucking in air, and that's never a good thing. So generally, we don't want to run our wells more than about 16 hours a day. With wells 5 and 8 offline, last summer, because of the drought and everybody wanting to water everything like crazy, we got very close to the point where we were pumping some of our wells upwards of 22 hours a day. So that was putting a tremendous strain on the mechanical equipment and preventing the cone of depression, if you will, around the wells from, you know, restoring itself by groundwater naturally flowing in and keeping that cone full of water. You know, the worst case scenario would be if we were to lose another well, either because of some man-made disaster, you know, a tanker truck rolls over, you know, on Route 28 near wells, the South Chatham well field, or we draw the water down so far in one of the wells that we start having bacteria issues and have to turn off another well. That would be the worst case scenario right now. So we're trying to do things that we are able to do, which is ask people to conserve water as much as possible. And as we've talked about on many occasions in the past, pumping water out of the ground, treating it to potable water standards, to then simply have people turn around and put it back on their lawn to water their grass, even in the best of times when all the wells were available and all, doesn't make sense.
Right.
That's a lot of public expenditure to provide water for a purpose that, it wasn't being treated for. The issue of private wells in many respects is a separate issue. In general, private wells are shallow and they draw from the unconfined aquifer. In general, even though the Cape is predominantly a sandbar, there are many layers of clay throughout the stratigraphy between the ground surface and the bedrock below our feet. And those clay layers provide what we call an unconfined aquifer above it that is basically open to the atmosphere, and then what's known as a confined aquifer below that clay layer down to bedrock or potentially another clay layer. In general, most home wells are in that upper unconfined aquifer because they tend to be relatively shallow, 20, 25, 30 feet. Because obviously to go down costs a lot more, and homeowners don't necessarily want to pay that if they can get enough water at a relatively shallow distance. Most municipal supply wells, including Chatham's, are much deeper, 70, 80, 90, 100, 120 feet. And in general, they're below that confining clay layer. So in essence, private wells and municipal wells are pulling from two different areas within the aquifer. All right? In general, the homeowner type wells are actually more susceptible to contamination because they're pulling from areas where their septic systems are also located. But if you're watering a lawn, that's a good thing because all that nutrient material that you're putting out of your septic system, you're then pulling out of the ground and you're using it to fertilize your lawn. Where municipal wells, because they're below that confining layer, they're not susceptible to the same sort of contamination. So in reality, the two are really looking at two different issues and two different, types of scenarios. We do not have right now, we don't really have a storage problem, except in the venue of if there's a lot of use on the water system resulting in a drawdown of our municipal storage tanks, which provide the force behind the water for fire protection purposes. Right now, with wells 5 and 8 offline, it takes the remaining wells longer to provide enough water if they're trying to provide water to restore the levels in the tanks at the same time they're producing and trying to produce a lot of water so people can water their lawns. So, once we get wells 5 and 8 back online, we'll be able to refill those storage tanks much more quickly. So really, it's not a question that we don't have storage capacity. It's just a question of the impact of the wells being offline and how quickly we can restore those storage tanks to the levels where we would like to see them. So, this is not an uncomplicated story. It's a complex story in Chatham right now, just because of the PFAS issue. We are also, as you know, we're working to bring wells 10 and 11, which are new wells. They were identified about a decade ago for providing Chatham additional capacity to meet the summer demand and the demand of, increased development in Chatham over the years, as pretty much every town on the Cape is looking to add more wells. Those wells were not done sooner because of the fact that once the well casings were put in place, MTBE, the gasoline additive, was discovered. And so the decision was made to hold off on bringing those wells into production and not incur the huge expense of having to put up a treatment facility when exactly as predicted happened basically that plume of contamination moved away from those wells and it's no longer an issue. The other thing that comes into play here, and we haven't really talked about this to any great extent, is the Massachusetts Water Management Act. This is a state act that limits the amount of water that any municipality in the state can take out of our common groundwater resources. All right? So based on the maximum amount of water that a town has withdrawn in the past, the state basically sets a limit and says, okay, you can withdraw up to this amount of water going forward. A number of years ago when the state did this, most of the towns in the Cape had issue with it because it didn't necessarily match up with peak summer demand. So there was a lot of discussion with the state agencies involved and the water purveyors on the Cape, most of the municipalities and others, to get some modifications made to that Water Management Act to take into account the fact that, you know, the Cape is a tourist economy and our water demand goes up significantly in the summer compared to the rest of the year and compared to other localities in Massachusetts. Now, that does not mean that we just can willy-nilly use as much water as we want. We have to use it in a prudent way. And unfortunately for, you know, some folks, using it for irrigation is not a prudent way to use public potable water. You know, the towns, this town, and every town spends a lot of money pumping that water out of the ground, treating it appropriately, you know, and then sending it through the pipes to people's houses to use for things like cooking, washing, you know, and those kinds of things where potable water is required. Watering a lawn, as I said, if you can do it with a private well and pull up some of that nutrient-laden groundwater from where you're discharging your septic system, that's a great thing. That's why we see many golf courses have shifted from using municipal water to putting in private wells under the fairways and basically just creating a huge recycling system. You know, they put fertilizer on the greens and then they pump, you know, some of that gets used by the plants, some of it goes right into the groundwater, and then they pump that groundwater up to water the fairways and whatnot because there's nutrients in that water and it saves, in the long term, it saves money on fertilizer. So anyway, sorry, I'm off my soapbox.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Duncanson. Any other questions or comments?
There's
Do we
one
have any
hand.
hands up?
There's one hand up.
I can't read that. Is that
It's Elaine Gibb.
Elaine? Okay, it's you. You have the floor, Elaine.
Thank you. I was one of the people who had asked for the select board to revisit the ban. I just want to point out that Wells 10 and 11, back in 2010, we appropriated money where they were 95% complete. And yes, then the MTBs or whatever they're called were found, but then they disappeared. The problem is that we never finished them. And we could have finished them years ago, but you know, it never came to the town again. The residents thought they were done. We only learned that they weren't pumping when we found out about the PFAS. So I hope we learn a lesson that if we had pursued that, I think we all understand now that water is key to this town. Without it, we've got nothing, no tourism, no anything. And that if we had finished those in 2018, 2019, we would not have this problem today because we would have had enough well capacity to take over for wells 5 and 8. So I just wanted to say that. And I won't repeat what Gloria had said, except to say that I think there's some other things we need to do. The people who follow the rules, and one of the problems we had was the inequity. People who followed the rules are the ones that were being penalized. There are 1,328 registered properties that have irrigation systems connected to the town, and only 477 have either gotten metered, and then another 151 dug wells. That's what we were told to do. And when 3/4 of the people haven't followed the rules, and they're still out there, they're not being metered, they didn't go to the expense. And I'm telling you, it's an incredible expense. If you have a house set back, you have to put the meter on the street and then run the pipes all the way up, digging up. If your driveway is 200 feet, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars. So that the alternative was to do that or to dig a well. And so for those of us who follow the rules, we're the ones that are being monitored. And I hope that if this ban has to continue, there are still inequities in it. What remained within it was that boaters can wash off their boats at all the town landings, recreational boaters, after a day at the beach or after going out fishing. But I can't wash down my car, which I have to use more frequently than somebody on a recreational boat, many of whom don't even live in Chatham and aren't paying any money towards it. And to say, this isn't about having green lawns. This is about taking care of our properties. When we can't, hose down the mold that's grown over the spring on our homes, when we can't take, seagull droppings off of our cars that eat into the paint, and yet renters can use outdoor showers because it's coming from the inside of the house. Every rental property here has outdoor showers. There can be 10, 15 people in the homes taking 2 showers a day. They are legal, but we can't, take care of sometimes our only investments, which is our homes. So I hope that if this has to continue, that we check to make sure that everybody's following the rules with either a meter or an irrigation well, and that the rules are consistent and not favoring certain groups of people over those of us who live here full time and are paying a big part of the boat. So I think those are my only comments right now. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Elaine. Anybody want to comment at all on Elaine's points at this time? No. Okay. Are we done with the Chatham water quality discussion? Anybody have any other questions or comments? If not, let's move the agenda to COVID-19. Dr. Duncanson?
Okay, I will just give you a quick COVID update. Let me share my screen here. Because as I've said before, I'm a great fan of visuals, and to me, they work a lot better than talking about it. So our weekly case count, this is what I've been tracking now since January. I think it's a little bit more informative than just, monthly case counts and how those are changing. So as you can see, we had an increase. We were down pretty low. Whoops, I just realized it. Those 2 NRs should be in the 2 spots where there's no red bars. But you could see at the beginning of March and into roughly the beginning of April, our case counts were very low, averaging 2, maybe 3 cases a week. And some cases we had no cases reported. And then since the beginning of April, we're up and averaging about between 15 and 20 cases a week. Last week, we had 18 new cases reported. So it seems to have stabilized in that 15 to 18 cases a week range. That's better than what we saw back in December, January, February, when we were averaging between 40 and 50 cases a week. But it's a little bit different pattern than we've seen in 2020 and 2021. Where we had, spikes in the fall and winter, and then the spring and early summer cases were pretty low. I'm sure we've all read and heard that cases across New England and across the country are increasing right now, which is a little bit different than the seasonal patterns we've seen in the previous 2 years. In terms of looking at our percent positivity rate, we were up to about just below 10%. And we've been staying there over the last number of weeks. And as we've talked about before, anything above the 5% is considered widespread community transmission. And as I've indicated before and sent out to the board, CDC has now got, or has had for the last 2 weeks, Barnstable County in their high classification for their community level, recognizing that, community transmission throughout Barnstable County is problematic, and the CDC is recommending that anyone, either vaccinated or unvaccinated, wear a mask in indoor public spaces. In our average daily incident rate, pretty much mirroring the same thing. We are at, just below 40 on that. We didn't get as high as we saw, obviously, during the Omicron surge, and we didn't get as high as what we saw at the beginning of the pandemic. So, that's good news. But again, it's a little bit different in terms of seasonality this year than we've seen in other years. And just to put it kind of in perspective, our percent positivity was 9.52, which was the 4th highest in Cape Cod. Barnstable County was at 8.88, and that was actually the highest county level in the state. For average daily incident rate, we are the ninth highest town on the Cape, which is, better news. We're trending down towards the lower end, and that's honestly only not because our rate has dropped, only because other towns on the Cape, their rates are climbing faster. Barnstable County was at 38 and the state was at 41. So, this is not just restricted to Chatham or Barnstable County. And then finally, something I've been showing the last couple of weeks to you and the select board, hospitalizations in Barnstable County. The blue line is Cape Cod Hospital. The more aqua colored is Falmouth. And you can see for Cape Cod Hospital, there was a significant increase in the rates as of last Thursday. They had 20 patients in Cape Cod Hospital last Thursday, including 3 in the ICU for COVID. And as you can see, there's been a steady progression in Falmouth Hospital as well, although the rates at Falmouth Hospital are significantly lower than Cape Cod. So, based on following a similar pattern to what we've seen previously, we see an uptick in cases, and then generally about 2 weeks or so later, we start to see an uptick in hospitalizations. The good thing, if there can be a good thing in all this message, the number of deaths has been pretty constant at very low levels. About 2/3 of the patients in the hospital are people that are fully vaccinated. So their level of disease is, relatively mild and responds well to appropriate treatment. And so with that, that is all I have for today's COVID update.
Questions? Dick?
Bob, yeah, I'm personally aware of several people in Chatham who have tested positive at home in the last week. Those tests have not been reported. Can you estimate what the true incidence of COVID is? And is it as high as it was last year? Since most people are doing home tests, and if it's positive, they don't call up the Board of Health and say, oh, I just thought you'd like to know I tested positive for COVID. So even though we only have 20 cases or 18 cases reported in Chatham, and we're seeing the hospitalizations go up relatively rapidly, are we really close to where we were last year?
I can't give you any specifics because, as you've correctly noted, the vast majority or a vast majority of people are probably doing home test kits, and they are not required to report to us to the local Board of Health or the state. I'm only aware of one place, and that's on Martha's Vineyard, where their health department has asked people to report those numbers. But even again, they've only asked. They're not requiring people to do it. So, I don't suspect. I know that cases are much higher than what are reported. Exactly how much higher, that I can't tell you. There really is just no way to know.
Should we consider requiring voluntarily home test results?
We certainly could think about that. I'm not sure what it necessarily would tell us. All the data that we have, all the guidance that we have from the state and CDC is, the best solution to this problem is mask when you're in indoor public settings. Make sure you're fully vaccinated. If you're eligible for the boosters, make sure you get them. Simply knowing whether there's 20 cases a week or 50 cases a week, I'm not sure that really tells us a whole lot. You know, we know what we need to do. People have to be adults. They have to take responsibility for their actions, and they have to do what the public health, you know, folks are recommending they do. Now that town meeting is over, I'm going to ask DPW to put the signboard back at the Rotary, indicating that the CDC has recommended wearing a mask in indoor public spaces. You know, short of going back to mask mandates, which I don't think anybody necessarily has a, you know, desire to do. You know, we're not doing it at the state level. We're not doing it nationally. You know, we're to the point where there really has to be public or individual responsibility for this situation. You know, people know what they need to do. They just need to do it. And then we can hopefully get through this thing.
Okay. Thank you, Bob.
I
Let's,
see Noble's got his hand up.
I didn't, Noble, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'd just say, I think that, as Bob added the statistic, the number of people in the hospital is an important measure of the severity of COVID in the community. And I think I read that of the patients in the hospital with COVID, the percentage is down to about a third were actually admitted because of COVID. So that number in the hospital now is sort of low, and it's even lower if you look at those admitted because of COVID. But that, to me, is a good measure of COVID in the community, maybe more so than the raw number of positive COVID cases now. That's all.
Thank you. All right, are we ready to move the agenda? We have one more item. Actually, we also have to do the minutes. Lighthouse Beach site visit with Parks and Rec. Judy, you asked that this be added to the agenda?
Yeah, Bob asked that we put this on the agenda. I don't know
I'm
why
hearing
we're
you.
getting this feedback.
Yeah, this is something that has taken place in the past, primarily when if you all remember, when the inlet was directly across from Lighthouse Beach or very close to it. There was a lot of concern over conditions at Lighthouse Beach, and the Board of Health had actually mandated a no swimming area towards the point where Lighthouse Beach kind of comes out and then, you know, turns pretty much due south to parallel the shoreline. So I'd gotten a request from the secretary over at Parks and Rec wanting to know when we were going to have the meeting for this year. And I said I would certainly bring it to the Board of Health, which we're doing. I guess, you know, I'm not sure that it has the urgency or the need that it has in the past, because as you're probably familiar, the inlet is now way down off Monomoy. And so the conditions at Lighthouse Beach are not what they were, say, 5-6 years ago, when it was directly open and there were, you know, very strong currents and whatnot in that area. We can certainly, if the board would like to take a nice little walk along that portion of the beach on a nice, bright, sunny day, we could certainly arrange that, you know, with Park and Rec. And, you know, it may be that the upshot of that visit is to, you know, recommend and make the vote that the no swimming area that's currently there be rescinded, that it's no longer needed. So we just wanted to bring this to you and have that quick discussion about, you know, if you want to go ahead and do that, and if there were any times that would be more conducive for the maximum number of, you know, Board of Health members to attend.
Well, I for one would be willing to do a walk again with an eye towards considering, you know, changing our policy about regular meetings. I would think that if Judy just announced a day and a time and asked all Board of Health members to respond whether they would plan to attend or not, or maybe give us 2 dates and let everybody indicate which of the dates we would be able to go, that we could just pick a time and a day and just go there and educate new board members about what the focus is, and then decide thereafter. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we'd have to.
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
just-
that's fine. The only thing is if we are going to have a quorum of Board of Health members, we would have to post it. So, yeah, we'd need to have, at least 48 hours notice of potential meeting dates and times so we could post it if there's going to be a quorum.
Okay.
And coordinate it with Parks and Rec as well, because
Yes.
they'll want to attend as
Who's the
well.
new director over there?
Don't-
They haven't chosen a director yet.
Okay, thank you.
So we can, we'll talk to their administrative assistant and try and arrange some dates and throw those out for you to look at.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, this is Noble. Does the harbor master come down or do that and represent the people actually patrolling the beach?
The Lighthouse Beach Patrol is under Park and Recreation,
Park and
not
Rec.
under the Harbor Master.
Okay.
All right,
I think one of the times he did show up, I can remember back in the early days when we first closed it, we depended on him for a lot of explanation of the way the water was changing.
okay.
So,
Yeah, and we can certainly work to have, once we know the date and time, we could certainly work to have the Harbor Master there.
yeah, I think that'd be a good idea, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Last item of the night is to accept the meeting minutes for May 2nd. Are there any questions, any edits or comments or corrections that any board members have on those draft minutes? If not, can I get a motion to approve the minutes as submitted? Motion to approve. Thank you, Ed. Second on for Carol. Thanks, Carol. All in favor of accepting the minutes of May 2nd, please say aye. Aye. Noble?
Aye.
Okay. Passes unanimously. Okay, we're at the end of the meeting. If anybody has any last-minute questions, now would be a time to raise them. Otherwise, we can vote to adjourn. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Thanks, Ed. Carol?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor of adjourning for the night, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Noble?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, thank you, everyone, for your time and attention, and staff. Good night.
Ba-da-ba-ba